Well, let me say, it is my honor to greet you this evening. I tried to greet most as you were coming in, but for those of you that I did not get the opportunity to, my name is Chris Johnson. I have the privilege of being the current president and CEO of our Ralph J. Stolley Countryside YMCA. As we do with almost all of our meetings and events here, we're going to pause to begin with prayer. So I've asked Larry Hollingshead, longtime trustee and board member, current trustee and board member, to come and pray for our evening.
Thank you, Chris. Would you please join me in prayer as we reflect on our past and, most importantly, look ahead to our Countryside YMCA's 50th anniversary and beyond. Dear Lord, we are thankful for our founders, for Ralph Stolley, for George Hinkle, for Neil Armstrong, for Marvin Young, Charlie Hamilton, Mike Norris, Ellis Thompson, and Jack Singleton. And we are equally thankful for those that they have inspired during the last 40 years. Many of them are here with us tonight. We are thankful for strong, wise, business-oriented board leadership, for excellent, dedicated staff, and especially for generations of our members whose lives have been enriched in return for their time, their treasure, and especially their children. Our children are the clay from which we mold the future. Now, as we embrace our future, may our leaders, our staff, and the members follow in your footsteps. May we grow in many dimensions as we serve together to build healthy spirit, mind, and body for all. Amen.
Thank you, Larry. And as he said, our primary goal tonight is to celebrate 40 amazing years. 40 amazing years of what, not just this place, but the people that are a part of this place represent. And we're going to do that by looking back and honoring those who have came. I hope you were able to enjoy part of that tonight, even just with the pictures and some of the things that we have or up on the banners, that it has brought back good memories, has brought back thoughts, maybe just from your own experience or your own family, or you've seen a face that you haven't seen of or thought of for a while. And we love that as well, just this opportunity to celebrate and remember. I want to give a special thanks for all of that. Our staff has been working hard to kind of gather things to display and to share. And the Warren County Historical Society also came through and went through their archives and brought these display panels in to share with us. And so we're just very appreciative of them and their efforts and their giftings in that as well. So this YMCA began as a conversation in 1971. It's actually closer to the 50 years that Larry mentioned than the 40 years, but that's where it started. And then in 1975, it was announced to the press. And so I look at 75 as this time where this commitment was made publicly. A commitment was made to the community. And I believe that commitment has been met in a significant way. This place is and does make a difference in this community, and that's what we celebrate. I believe we are continuing to do that and continuing to live in that commitment. Tonight we celebrate the building and the people who've been a part of that. Those who took that commitment, took those words, and try to put that into practice and into action each and every day. And there are so many of those stories that have happened, that have occurred. We're going to try to recognize a few people tonight, or groups of people. We're going to do our best. I'm going to open with an apology and also an expectation here. So we're going to recognize a number of groups of people rather than names of people. Number one, I'm going to mess up the names. And number two, I'll invariably forget someone. So I don't want to do either of those things. And so there are going to be opportunities where we're just going to recognize groups that have been a part of this story. I'm going to ask you to stand when we do that. And then here's another phenomenon that I'm looking forward to. For some of you, this is going to look a little like one of our aerobics classes. Because we're going to have you stand and then sit back down, and then stand and then sit back down, and then stand again. And for so many of you, as I look across faces, for so many of you, that's the story. It hasn't been just one area where you've been a part of the Countryside YMCA, but it is over and over through multiple involvements that you have been a part of this story, and we want to try to recognize that today. So that's what we're going to begin with, our recognition of guests. And I think that's every single person that's here. So let me begin. Larry mentioned our founders in his prayer. If you are here representing one of our founders in their family, would you please stand? Thank you. Thank you on their behalf. You know, this is, I was humbled to even walk on the stage, and I'm confident that I'm going to leave this room tonight even more humbled, to just even be a part of this, and to have you that have already been recognized and the many others that we will. So thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being a part of this honor. You know, another very important group to this story, those that heard that commitment before we had the building in place, are charter members. So if you are one of our charter members, will you please stand? Again, this is a group of people that heard a vision and joined in with that vision and said, we will be a part of that. We will be a part of that story. We will be a part of putting that into reality, what was just words. And so we thank you for taking that step forward. Our next group, this is our Heritage Club. So these are our people who have said, you know, it matters to me what I've done while I'm here, but it matters that this gift continues. You know, even after I am not able to be here, this is important enough to me that I want to make it part of my legacy that I leave. And so if you're a member of our Heritage Club, would you please stand? Again, thank you. Thank you so much. I mean, that just the confidence I receive from having you stand and say, we are entrusting forward. Thank you for that. That is, you know, we began by even honoring our founders who did that, many of them financially, but also with their ideas, their vision, their commitment, that paying forward to leave a legacy. And there's an opportunity for each of us to do that too as part of this Heritage Club and saying, this is important to this community and we want to be a part of it. Our next group, these are the ones who get to come in here day after day. But I want to start with those who are retirees. So if you have been YMCA staff and are now retired, would you stand, please? I might mention those three again in a little bit, so just save that thought. So thank you. But now I also want to take a moment to all of those current staff, all those who are doing it day after day to serve in this commitment. All of our current staff, please stand. Thank you so much for what you do. Thank you for allowing me to be a part of the team that does this. In this moment, as I'm recognizing staff, I don't want to be remiss in something. So I know she had a lot of help, but Sarah Cheeseman put most of this night together. Stand up. And I think she did an amazing job, so thank you, Sarah. This is wonderful. And like I said, I know she had a lot of help. That's what we do around here. When someone has something, a group follows. And I love that. And I love that that's part of who we are. Our next group, we have just those that step forward each year and say, we're going to support the work that is done here. This is our Chairman's Roundtable. So if you're a Chairman's Roundtable donor, would you please stand? Are a few of you getting that workout I promised? Up and back down, up and back down. Hey, we wouldn't be the Y if you didn't come out with a little bit of that, right? Okay, we've been blessed as I look back over the lists of the people involved. We've been just blessed with amazing volunteer leadership at this Y. All the way back from those original planning groups to then our trustees and our board and our committees. And so if you are, let me do it this way. If you're current board or trustee, would you please stand? And then if you could stay standing, if we could have our past board or trustees that are here stand to join. And then any of our committee members. So if you have served on one of our committees, that includes the Major Gifts Committee, Ron. All right. Yes, Barney, thank you. All right, thank you very much. And then they each stood a little bit ago, but I want to, and we're going to hear from a couple of them here in a moment. But I do want to recognize the predecessors before me in this role, our former CEOs. So Jim and Steve and Mike, thank you for being here. Thank you for preparing this place for me well. And so I thank you for that. I thank you for the faithfulness that you've shown and that you prepared a place. And that I get to step into that now and hope to fulfill it even close to the level that the three of you did. So thank you very much for being here tonight with us. I'm going to take a break from speaking because I think you would like that. But we've asked a few people to come just share a few memories of their own. Just what they have been a part of here or moments, just other voices that can speak to this Countryside YMCA and what it means. And we're going to begin with Kathleen Stalin.
Hello, everyone. I'm not here with memories, but I'd like to give a summary. You know, we often look at businesses and buildings and wonder, who had this dream? Who got this started? There may be a name. Do we know what that person was like? Generally, no. But for a few moments tonight, I will give you a glimpse of Ralph Stolley, who had the dream of Countryside YMCA. Ralph was an inventor. He saw a need or problem and invented something mechanical to make the process easier. For example, aluminum would corrode, so he created the process of anodizing aluminum, which is a covering that keeps aluminum from corrosion. However, his most notable invention was creating the equipment to make the easy open tab on aluminum cans, the can openers we use today. Now, for all of you that are my age, in high school in the 60s, don't raise your hand, you'll remember those old openers that had to be pulled off the can and in the process left cuts on our fingers. Not only that, but the tabs were all over the place. In the grass, on the beach, cutting our feet and being swallowed by animals. As the story went, Ralph had been working on a new tab opener, one that remained on the lid after opening. But there was another man in the industry that invented it and got the patent. But that didn't stop Ralph. He patented the machinery to mass produce it. Well, after many years of accomplishments, in 1971, Ralph began discussing with other Lebanon businessmen about creating this Y. Oops, excuse me. He believed the youth of this community needed a wholesome environment and a place to go and be active. His plan was to visit successful YMCAs to use their successes and avoid their mistakes. Local Lebanon leaders went with him. They visited 27 YMCAs. During this time, Neil Armstrong joined the group and participated in their meetings and discussions planning this Y in great detail. The name Countryside was chosen and opened in 1978. There would be a pool, ball courts, and workout areas, and also a fishing hole, a lake for sailing and canoeing, an orchard, and a wooded area for family picnics. It also included a small dairy farm, truly in the countryside. Today, the Ralph J. Stolley Countryside YMCA offers arts and education, aquatics, camps, Christian emphasis, events, health and wellness, sports, and gymnastics. Now, in this list is Christian emphasis. On a very personal note, Ralph was a Christian, a believer in Jesus Christ. When Ralph was 25 with tuberculosis and while a patient at Drake Hospital in Cincinnati, he accepted Jesus as his Lord and Savior. From that time on, Jesus led his life. Excuse me. Ours is a special Y that was started with determination by an initial vision of a talented businessman and loving husband and father, Ralph Stolley, and furthered by outstanding leaders in our community, you're here today, who today participate in the business and operation of the Y for the benefit of each one of us here tonight. I hope for you that this evening will result in a continued commitment of service to the Ralph J. Stolley Countryside YMCA, a commitment that will continue to keep this Y as the best in the country and in the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathleen. You know, I grew up on a dairy farm, and I am very thankful that there is not still a dairy farm here to manage. But we still represent so much of that original vision, and I am thankful for that. To continue our story, I'd like to have Steve come and take us a little further down the path of the Countryside YMCA, if you would please. Steve Boland.
Well, I haven't been doing much work with the mic lately. I've been gone from Countryside for 13 years, but 23 years ago, I was hired as the president CEO of this YMCA, and I'd like to share a little bit about those 9.5 years, really 4 key areas that I'm sure the staff who were here, the board who is here, the trustees, the board and staff team that worked very hard for the time that I was here. The first one you've heard about, and folks have been introduced, but soon after I came, having just left the LaPorte Y and starting not a heritage club there, but an Horizon Club, mainly because the hospital had the heritage, used the heritage name in their fundraising. So we basically went to the Horizon Club. And very proud of the fact that the trustees and the board members and staff really started that Heritage Club here very, very soon after I came in August of 1996. And it still meets annually. Kathleen Stalin is a gracious hostess for that event, and has been for a good share of the time that I've been here. And I get the invitation each year. Carol and I are still members. Second one that I'm also proud of is the leadership that board and staff had in starting the sustaining membership annual fund drive. And I'm sure many of you are part of that. That started just after the turn of the century in the year 2000. Bill and Mary Ellen Haynes were very instrumental, and I know that they still are. It's very important to them. The money raised does wonderful things for families that otherwise would not be able to participate in the Y financially. So the Stolley family, prior to that, starting that sustaining membership, basically funded that program, the sustaining program here. And now it gets bigger every year, and wonderful job that continues to happen. I think the third thing, and I owe a lot of this to Judy Bauer and her wonderful membership staff. Starting in 1996, we had 12,886 members, and by the end of 2005, we ended up with 26,675. And a lot of hard work on the membership staff. I'm not going to try to introduce them all because I'm going to miss and blunder on a name, but they do a wonderful job. But I do want to point out a few things that happened that created all those new membership. Number one, the board approved a new option for membership. And that was very early on. Originally, in order to be a member, there was only the family membership that was offered. And by changing over and offering an adult membership, and this happened very early on in the early part of my tenure, it gave us the opportunity to be able to start a corporate membership plan. Without an adult option, many of the people who are employed in Warren County live somewhere else. And in order for them to have to join as a family, it would make it very difficult for them to be able to get down here. And many of the corporations were asking for that option for their out-of-town employees. And the third one was payroll deduction for those companies, and bank draft, which we all know about bank draft now. Most of our bills are paid that way. But back in '96, it was a little difficult to bring people around to that. Basically, it cost more to do it that way back then for families. And by doing the option where they could pay over a 12-month period, it made it much easier for people to join. and much harder for them to drop the membership. If that bill came, if the bill came at the wrong time, if you needed new tires, or if your car broke down, or a television set, that bill may sit on the bottom of the pile. So by the time the end of my tenure, there were 109 corporate memberships, and I know it's many more than that now. The last, and probably the one area that I'm proudest of is the board, staff, and the fundraiser, Suddes and Associates, and many, many staff hours put into a $13 million campaign that finished up in the year 2000. We ended up raising that $13 million. $10 million came from a collaboration with Middletown Regional Hospital. The remainder came from contributions from business, staff, board members and trustees. Many companies in town supported it also. Bill Faulkner, and I didn't see Bill, but Bill was instrumental in putting a financial plan together. And I know he's been doing that for many years for the Y, and certainly recognize that from Bill. I also skipped George Leisure. George was the president of Gent Manufacturing when we visited George first for the corporate membership. So I wanted to thank George. You got a great program started. It's great to see Countryside and all the people here that I recognize a lot of faces. And the new group that's here now has new branches, new partnerships, new leadership, and the latest in major renovation. This building that you're in now is totally different than the one that I left, and a real bonus for the community. I wish you continued success in what I know will be another wonderful 40 years for Countryside. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you so much, Steve. When we were talking before in the beginning, before Steve, Jim Hoffman was the CEO. And if you were hired by Jim, stand up and wave your hand. There's Holly, Peggy, Judy. What a legacy to hire people that then 20 years later and more are continuing to carry forward. And so, Jim, I thank you specifically for those three and for many others for that. So thank you, Jim. Steve, I know you too. There are many who came into this family as Steve was here and he brought them in. And so I thank you for that as well, and who I have the opportunity to work with and who continues your work here. And we appreciate that. And now to continue our story, Mike Carroll.
I'm going to be telling a story, and that worries the heck out of my wife, but I'm going to tell stories anyway. And my story has 3 chapters to it. And these chapters are all very different in our life, but they miraculously all fit together like puzzle pieces where we are today. And I think you'll see that as I go through my 3-chapter story. The first chapter I call Family. In 1983, we were living in Maineville. We had 2 4-year-olds and a toddler, and a friend of mine from the facility we worked at in South Lebanon just kept bugging me. Well, we're just going to call the friend Larry H. I'm not going to mention any names. Kept bugging me about being a member of the Y. Well, we were going to church in Lebanon Presbyterian. We were doing preschool at Methodist preschool. So we were going back and forth by here all the time. So we finally joined Countryside YMCA. It was great. We could stop either after church or before a church event or after school and use the facility. It was a wonderful thing. It really fit our life well. And then in 1985, it was fitting our life so well, we decided we wanted to move to Lebanon. So we, at that point, we were going to struggle with just what kind of a house could we afford. So we found a house, beautiful house. It was only 3 miles from the Y, 3 miles from church, 3 miles from the preschool, but it had no water. But we knew the water was coming in and had a very bad well. So my poor wife used Countryside YMCA for hot water for 9 months. And if you remember the way we were laid out, it was wonderful to take those 3 kids and walk into the winter wind as you were trying to get to the front entrance because there was no side entrances. So as we developed later on with this expansion, parking was really important because I remember those days. So that was my experience then. Then in 1998, the same Larry H., again, I'm not trying to mention any names, convinced me that I should join the Building and Grounds Committee. I had experience with building facilities, and they at that point were in the planning stages for what would become the 2000 expansion, which would nearly double the size of the facility and then make us the largest YMCA facility in the world. It was a great experience. I worked with some really great people. Steve remembers it well. As we found out that the soccer arena was too small, we had to immediately redesign it. So that was my time in 1998 with that facility doing the 2000 expansion. By 2001, I was asked to be a member of the board, and I was proud to be a member of the board. I served on the board. I've served in many different committee assignments, and eventually was board chair. God was with me in all of those portions of Chapter 1. Let's go to Chapter 2. We call this Serving Warren County. In 2014, after being employed for over 30 years in engineering and management, there was an acquisition of our company, and the decision was made as all the upper managers were going to leave and new management would move in. Well, unfortunately, I was sitting in one of those upper management positions, so for the first time in my life, I found myself unemployed. That's a bit of a panic, but I put a plan together, did a lot of praying, and got ready for my new chapter in life. About that time, Steve had left. We had a wonderful experience with Steve as our CEO, but we had an intermediate CEO that was not a cultural fit. And if the CEO does anything, he has to fit with the culture of the organization. So he exited very abruptly, and they needed somebody to step in as an interim CEO. Well, I was unemployed and wasn't doing anything, so I said, okay, I'll do that while I'm tiding my time and looking for a real job. I did that for a little less than a year, and I loved it. I loved the mission of the YMCA. I love the Christian basis. I love serving people and not just trying to make a profit for an organization. So when I had the opportunity to accept the position as a full-time CEO, I readily accepted it. One thing I did find, though, in that time frame is I studied about Countryside and I studied our organization. We had the best Y in the world here in central Warren County. But if you looked at our charter, our service area was all of Warren County. And we probably weren't doing a great job of serving all of Warren County. So due to many factors that just God laid in our lap largely, we were able to start serving those other areas. In 2005, we opened the Y Express in the Landon area. First time we or anybody in Southwest Ohio had tried an Express Y, but it was very, very successful. So successful that we moved the location about 1/8 of a mile away, doubled its size, and it's still thriving today due to Zach and his management team. So that helped us serve the south side of the county. On the east side of the county, we found a partner, a marvelous partner, and on the west side of the county, we found a partner in Otterbein. And Otterbein at that point was also going through an expansion, and they wanted to build a life enrichment center. But they do nothing about how to run a life enrichment center. So we partnered up and we agreed to be the operator for the Life Enrichment Center, serving 800 people in the community of Otterbein. And that began serving the west side of our county. Then later, almost miraculously, our child care facility was kicked out of its location in the eastern side, Mainville area, and we didn't know what we were going to do, and we were able to land a contract with the Presbyterian Church in Mainville, and we moved in there, much nicer facility, could serve that community, which was growing very well, and miraculously, the Presbyterian Church of Cincinnati wanted to get rid of it. Well, we took a wild offer and offered well less than half of its book value, and they accepted. So we purchased the facility in Mainville and could begin serving the east side of the county. Now, I'm going to leave the west side of the county to Chris. So Waynesville's waiting for you, Chris. Let's move to Chapter 3. Chapter 3 is what I call caring community. During 2005 and 16, we did the makeover. You're sitting in part of that makeover now. And the intention there was not to increase the size of the Y, but to make it more functional and meet the needs of its members. And I think we largely were able to do that. But by the end of 2016, I was beginning to feel very bad. I had many physical ailments that I just could not explain. Many doctor visits, couldn't figure out what it was, and finally was diagnosed with cancer, with lymphoma. And with that, I proceeded into 8 months of chemotherapy, much of that time in and out of hospitals. But here's the part that where Countryside fits in so miraculously. I made it through that because of my family, because of my community, because of the staff here, because of many people in this room who were praying for me. God brought me through, and your prayers brought me through. So I'm here today to thank all of you for that. I'm here today because of you. And God has had a plan for me all through my life. Well, that was Chapter 3. I'm ready for Chapter 4, but I don't know what it's going to bring, but I know it'll involve Countryside. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. I had the opportunity the last couple days to gather with CEOs for YMCAs around Ohio. And the first question every single one of them asked me was, how's Mike doing? And so that's as much a testament to you and the relationships that you build with those people that you come in contact. It was a great joy for me to say the words cancer-free. It's a great joy to share that with you as well. And so it was so fun. All right, this a little different perspective. I've asked Scott Beech to come and share a little bit of his life alongside Countryside. Can I call it that?
Sure.
All right.
Good evening again. My name is Scott Beech. I had the good pleasure and blessing of growing up here. Third parent. My father and I had tremendous memories here. I remember at the outdoor pool, probably 5, 7 years old, watching this be developed. And as I grew up, you start to really appreciate what this offers. Got to work here as well with some of the staff through high school and college. But looking back, when you travel and you see what this Y has to offer and what this staff imparts into us daily, just it's part of our family's life. I'm not trying to get emotional here, but it literally, we can't wait to get here. I've got my 2 little boys here as well. and we're here sometimes at 5:30 in the morning before they go to school. My dad and I are here maybe Tuesday and Thursdays at 10 o'clock. But what a wonderful place to raise a family that is Christ-centered. Richard, where are you? I remember meeting Richard here years ago, and just his testimony is amazing to me. What a fellow brother in Christ. And to keep those Christian principles intact in what we're going through in this world, it's just so much of a blessing to come here almost daily. My kids were frustrated the Y's closed right now to go to that side because they just love playing here so much. But we get to spend a lot of quiet time in that chapel down there, just as a family. We'll go through devotions in the morning, many times before we go to school. My older sister, I call her Anita back there, we'll harass each other, Deborah. But there's so many friends here that Mike, I've got to know over the years, and Steve, and Jim. But when people take an interest in you when you're a young person, many of you are still here. We don't forget that. It makes us feel special. It makes us feel, you guys are the light of Christ. And walking with that light has been so instrumental. When people come into this town, first thing I ask them when they're moving here, have you seen our YMCA? And if they haven't, they just get in the car and go. And so many different people have been able to be blessed by Mr. Stolley's vision on this. That's been a true inspiration. Thank you to the Stolley family, and just a true inspiration that business is making a difference. Kind of like Mike said, not just in business to make a profit, but to share the gifts of our time, our talents, our treasures with others. Whether it's teaching kids swim lessons, coaching basketball, which my father did me and now I'm doing our kids. Just those times when those key people in your life take that interest, it makes a tremendous impact no matter what age we are. But I've had many great memories at this facility, and I wish it the best of luck the next 40 years as well, and we'll see you when we're here almost daily. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think we've heard a little bit. I wish I could just, we each take a turn to come up and share. We'd be here a really long time, and there are just so many stories. But throughout, you hear these similar themes over and over and over. I get the great joy. My office sits in a busy part of the Y, and often people will just stop by and they want to tell their story. And I love that. I had a day a couple weeks ago. I wasn't planning on sharing this. I had a day a couple weeks ago where someone stopped by and they started telling me their story, but then it turned into, we'll call them suggestions. And at one point, I looked at her and I said, "I'm not sure what you're asking me to do. What would you like for me to do?" And she said, "I just need someone to pray with me." I said, "I can do that." And so we stopped, and I prayed with her in my office. Later on that day, I was stack a to-do list. I'm behind. I kind of went in and I shut the door, and I think I'm gonna work through some things. And there was another knock on the door, and I look up, and this gentleman had his face right in the glass. And I tried to hide it, but I think there was a little bit of me that, I was gonna. And he looked in. He said, "It'll just be 30 seconds. It's never just 30 seconds. He says, "It'll just be 30 seconds. I said, "Okay, what can I do?" He says, "Would it be okay if I prayed for you?" And I said, "Absolutely." That's all he wanted. He came in, put his hand on my shoulder, and prayed for me. I love working in a place where those stories happen. I love being a part of a family where that kind of care happens. I believe that was part of the commitment made 40 years ago. I don't believe that commitment had an expiration date on it. I believe they meant for that to continue to be a commitment to this community. It was not just one generation's gift, but it was a gift that was going to be passed generation to generation to generation, much like a baton. And the generation that holds it is called to be a good steward of that. I believe that's what this place and we represent. If it's okay, I'd like to read a short scripture from one of my favorite biblical leaders. So this is from Nehemiah. And just to set the context a little bit, so the Jewish people had been taken away into captivity, but now we're kind of returning back to their city, to their home, Jerusalem. But their wall was still crumbled and down. It had not been rebuilt. And at that time, a wall around the city gave that city legitimacy and protection. And it became part of an identity for a people, that they had this wall. And so the people of Jerusalem at this time, although they were home, they were lacking this identity. They were lacking this protection. And, in today's world, we don't build walls to protect us. But I do believe this YMCA, much of that vision was we want a place for our kids to go. We want a place for our families to gather. We want a place to be community with one another. And so in many ways, I do think this YMCA represents this identity and this wall of protection and this wall of Lebanon and who we are, and then who this larger community we represent and can be. And so Nehemiah was the one the Lord tasked with rebuilding the wall. You are to go home and rebuild this wall of Jerusalem. And the enemies didn't like that. And so they tried to find ways to keep him from the work. And so here's the quote. It is Nehemiah chapter 6 and the first part of verse 3. And the enemies came to him, and I sent messengers to them saying, this is Nehemiah speaking, I am doing a great work, and I cannot come down. Friends, I believe we are doing a great work. I believe that was the initial commitment that was given and that has now been passed on from person to person and generation to generation, that we are doing a great work. And we cannot pause, and we cannot stop, and we cannot be distracted from that. Our community is expecting that of us. Our community is holding us to that commitment to be there for them, to care for them. When we say we are for all, to mean we are for all. And I believe that's the great work that we have been doing and that we are called to continue to do. We celebrate the past, but part of our goal tonight is to invite you, and many have already said as they talk that they're a part of this future, but I invite you to be a part of this as we continue forward. Larry mentioned the 50th. Scott mentioned the 80th, for 40 more years. We're going to continue to celebrate these as we go forward, and we invite you to be a part of that and the work that we do. And so our gift, we have a gift for you as you leave tonight. And it's not something for you to put on your mantle or to display. We thought about things like that. But we have a gift that we actually don't even want you to keep. We have a gift that we're going to encourage you to give away. We have for each of you tonight, as you leave, guest passes to this Y. And our encouragement to you is that you would share this with someone new. That you would think about is there a neighbor that has moved into nearby that you can share this with? Is there a family at church that you can say, hey, we have something we want you to know about, and here you go? Is it the lady that checks you out at Kroger, or the young man that serves you your meal? I leave that to you to figure out who. But we invite you to join us in this by inviting others and encouraging others to bring their story to this story and to be a part of this. I'm going to close, much like we opened, with a prayer. And when I say much like we opened, I don't mean just much like we opened an hour ago. But I have the prayer that was recited at the dedication on November 6th, 1978. And it perfectly applies. And I would like to pray that for us again tonight. But would you stand with me? God of all grace and love, we praise thee with our lips. Grant that we may now also praise thee in dedicated service. May thy presence be felt in the programs offered in this building, that young and old alike may be led in the paths of service unto thee. We do gratefully acknowledge before thee those leaders of the past whose commitment and work have brought us to this momentous occasion in the life of the Countryside YMCA. We are mindful also of the many kind hands who have labored diligently and well for the present. May we be even grateful to those individuals, organizations, companies, foundations, and firms who have contributed generously of themselves and their substance, that we might enjoy for future these splendid facilities, which is our privilege to dedicate here this day. We, the members and friends of the Countryside YMCA, conscious of the new and challenging opportunities that are now before us, do dedicate this building and ourselves to the glory of the Almighty God and for the furtherance of thy kingdom here upon earth. Amen.